Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Mo Show Live. Real excited about today's edition of the show. For a lot of you people who follow me and know me, that may know I'm located here in Huntsville, Alabama, and for a lot of people who may be watching this recording later on that share it out. Here in Huntsville, we have a lot of great things about our city, and we're real proud of our city and our area here in North Alabama. But one of the things we're most proud of is being the home of the U.S. Space and Rocket Center and a home of Space Camp. For those of you who have traveled to our area, when you come into downtown Huntsville, where my office is located, when you pass on Interstate 565 off to the right, you can't help but see the iconic rockets and the space shuttle that is now, a lot of times when you see photographs of our area, that's kind of what you see. And what you think of is you think of the Space and Rocket Center. So that is, something since I've moved to this area over 9 years ago has been kind of, just iconic for me. And that's why I wanted to bring today's guest on and share that with everybody and share her with everybody. One of the cool things about the Space and Rocket Center and Space Camp is that it's not only an attraction for here in Huntsville and for local tourists, but it's an attraction for not only the United States, but from around the world. And it is really a global attraction. And I'm really excited to share that with everybody. So today's guest is Pat Ammons. She's the Director of Communications here at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. Pat is a UAH graduate, so she graduated, for those who are not from around here, from the University of Alabama in Huntsville. She's got a background as a reporter for almost 15 years with the Huntsville Times, a local paper here. And I think she's been with the Space and Rocket Center for about 3.5 years. Does that sound about right?
That's right.
That's right. Pat, thank you so much for taking time. I know you guys have had a lot on your plate lately out there, but thanks for taking time today. How are you?
I'm great. We have had a lot on our plate, but it's all good. Very exciting stuff here at the Rocket Center.
Well, that's awesome. And I know here in Huntsville, with a lot of our scientists and engineers that make up a lot of our community, everybody and around the country for that matter has been eclipse crazy. I know you guys had a lot going on with that. We had and I'm going to touch on this later on in the show, but you had a big announcement at the Space Center yesterday with Governor Ivey here with some funds that were donated to start a new camp and a new building. But folks, give you an idea of how big what we're talking about is out here at the Space Center. The Space Center is the number one paid tourist attraction in Alabama. Over 650,000 plus come to pay to see the Space Center every year. So that's a really big deal. And it's also, you hear on television shows, you hear people talk about Space Camp all the time. And so when you hear about that, they're talking about right here at Huntsville, Alabama. And so can you kind of give us a little bit of a history of the Space Center and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, how it got started, so our audience can better understand it?
Sure. Well, the Rocket Center, the concept for the Rocket Center dates back to the 1960s, when, of course, this Huntsville is the city that sent man to the moon, and so sent America to the moon, and that work was being done here in a place that people don't always associate with space. If you live here, you do, because as other cities say, we say other cities have a skyline, where we have a space line, and that's, those rockets and that shuttle that you were talking about. So yes, this was the center, this remains the center of propulsion research and development for NASA and other space and defense companies here work on a lot of rockets and missiles here. And so it was very important to Dr. Von Braun, who was the first director of Marshall Space Flight Center, NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, and also the lead engineer of the team that helped build that giant Saturn V rocket that took us to the moon. And so he felt like it was very important that we establish a facility here in our community to highlight the work that was done here, to show the world Huntsville's role in the space industry. And so that's where it all began, with him approaching the legislature in the mid-60s to say, we need to make sure people understand how special this place is. And so with that, it was actually the first And until recently, the only capital funds this facility has ever gotten from the state to establish this facility, which opened in 1970. And it's been the home since that time of the National Historic Landmark Saturn V rocket, which is one of only three and still in existence. Ours is the only one that is the three parts that all went together at one point, and it was used for dynamic testing here in Huntsville. And if any of your viewers are Huntsville natives who lived here back in the 60s, they'll remember what that sounded and felt like, because they tested this big old rocket that we have here out at Marshall Space Center. And it's a magnificent thing to behold when you walk into the Davidson Center for Space Exploration here.
It really is, and I've had the privilege of going to some functions out there, and when you just look up and but even for, like I said, driving down the interstate, because the way the Davidson Center is set up with all the glass, you can just see it from the road. But when you really get in there and are able to walk around and see the size of this thing and how what engineering and scientific technology it took to create this rocket, in the 50s and 60s to send us to the moon, it's pretty impressive. Mm-hmm.
Well, we have the great privilege of having many of those original engineers who worked on that rocket, that very rocket, serving as volunteers here. And they spend their time, and they love to talk to our guests about their role and what they did and what it was like. And I've heard so many of them say it was such an exciting time they didn't even want to go home. On the weekend, they didn't even want to go home, and they couldn't wait to get back to work on Monday, because they knew they were doing really important work. And so we're very proud to be able to have that on display. We also, of course, have the Apollo 16 capsule, which did go to the moon. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to walk down the length of the Saturn V, walk under that 363-foot long rocket, and get all the way to the end, see the Apollo 16, look inside and imagine the three human beings that sat in there, and then look back at that giant rocket and just imagine what it must have been like, to the courage and the sense of exploration to sit on top of that giant firecracker, basically, and that's a lot of fuel, and go to the moon. It's an amazing story of human achievement.
Well, it really is, and when you kind of think about it, it's really the basis for our community here. I mean, with scientists and engineers, and that has grown and grown and grown to what it is now, with not only Marshall Space Flight Center and NASA, but the Redstone Arsenal and all the defense contractors that are here, with so many people work in the defense and rocket and propulsion industry here that ties into Marshall Space Flight Center.
This was a little agricultural community. It was always a smart community, always the forward-thinking community. But until the rocket scientists got here, it was also a very small community, and they literally laid the groundwork for the community that it is today, which is full of smart, interesting people from all over the world.
Well, let's kind of touch on that a little bit further. So we've kind of been touching on it in pieces of what's out there. But so when somebody comes to Huntsville, if they're making a trip driving through the Southeast and they have an interest in space exploration, NASA and rockets and that kind of thing, what can they expect to see, Pat, when if they pay a general admission and come into the Space Center for a day? What kind of things do the grounds have for them to see, the attractions there?
Well, of course, we're the official visitor center of Marshall Space Flight Center. And of course, Marshall is located on Redstone Arsenal, which is a closed military base. So you can't just drive out there and say, hey, what's NASA up to in Huntsville? So this is where you can come to see the work that's been done at Marshall, the work that was done, the work is still being done. We have one of our exhibits that we have here is our Science on Orbit exhibit, which is a model of the Payload Operations Integration Center out at Marshall, where they speak to the astronauts 24 hours a day. They manage the science payloads aboard the station right here in Huntsville. As a matter of fact, I got a call the other day from an astronaut who we were inducting into the Space Camp Hall of Fame, and she was in Russia training, and when she called me, it routed through a 256 number. So she was calling me from Russia here in Huntsville, but the number came up on my phone as a 256 number. So this is sort of a communication hub for a lot of really important work that's being done, both on the ground and in space. And also part of that exhibit are 2 modules of the International Space Station that have that illustrate how people are living and working in space. So you'll get to see everything from some of the food they eat to a sleeping berth. There's even a space toilet, so you can see what that looks like and how that operates. If you're everybody wants to know, so how do you go to the bathroom in space? Some really important things that they have to do, like how much they have to exercise in space. I mean, that's one of the things that is a really critical aspect of living in space, is being incredible physical condition maintaining your bone density and your muscle mass takes a lot of work in space. You have to exercise a minimum of 2 hours a day, very hard cardiovascular kind of exercise, just to stay as healthy as you would be here on the ground. So also it talks a lot about the science that's being done there, because that's one of the great things about the International Space Station. It's basically it's a science lab. And so we show you that, and we have on display the history of the American manned space program and all the vehicles, every step of the vehicles along the way that we used to launch the first satellite, to the first human, to the moon. And then also we have the only full display of a shuttle stack, where you get to see the external fuel tank, the solid rocket boosters, and an orbiter. Of course, our orbiter is not a flown orbiter, but it was a very important part of the program for testing purposes. Then you walk over to the Davidson Center, and that's where you have the magnificent Saturn V. And we are also the only place in the world where you'll see a vertical Saturn V. We have a full-scale model of the Saturn V rocket at our facility, and it's going to, you can see, that, oh my gosh, look how tall that is. And we also have other things in our facility, such as a 1/10 scale model of the Space Launch System, which is what NASA is working on for deep space exploration. So it's kind of the past, the present, and the future of space exploration through Huntsville's eyes.
Right. Well, it's really cool, folks. If you haven't been out there, if you're in the area, it's a sight to behold, and it really gives you a lot of just true understanding of the technology, where we've come from and where we are, and what a lot of our community stands for now, where we're going. I want to thank a lot of people here that are here with us: Mitch Jackson, Pat Cross, Chris Cassidy, Hannah Acker, and Bonnie Alexander, and Andy Seja for watching and doing. I had a question. I don't know if you can address this or not, but it's kind of a fun question, so I want to see one of our viewers was asking. Pat, do you know if it would be true that the early rockets have less computer power than like today's average smartphones? Is that true?
Way less. Yeah, the early technology, I mean, you have to remember all this, that's one of the most amazing things about looking at the Saturn V rocket, is that was done with pieces of paper, pencils, and slide rules, all the calculations that were done for that. There were no personal computers, and the computers that were used for the development of that rocket took up buildings the size of, the Davidson Center. So it's, yes, absolutely. You actually have more computer technology in a singing gift card than you did in what took us to the moon, because there's a microchip in a singing gift card, and that didn't exist. So yeah, the ability to do what we did at the time that we did it is really an extraordinary story.
That is really cool to think about. That your smartphone now has so much more technology than what they used to send man to the moon, but yet they did it, and they persevered and found a way to do it.
Absolutely. There were no computer modelings to test these rockets. They just had to put those babies up on the stand and, okay, let's go back to see what do we do next? What do we do next? So it's truly amazing.
Well, one of the other things that I wanted to kind of let you touch on and share with our audience, and not only Space Camp, but I want to talk about that a good bit, but the day camps and the children's workshops that for people that are passing through or maybe visiting, or a lot of people come through North Alabama going to the beach and that there are a lot of great day camps, space and aviation robotics camps that are out there, that if their child has an interest in that they might could explore doing that out at the Space Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, we have a variety of programs. We do have a day camp program that we offer during the summer. We also have it like say Labor Day, for instance, we're going to have a 1 day, we call it Rocket Explorer experience, where children ages 5 to 10 can just come and spend the day with us. They absolutely will hit the ground running at 8 a.m. and they build rockets, they do fun things, and learn a lot about space, but also have just a lot of fun. They get to go on the climbing wall. They get to get in some of our simulators like Hypership, which has it gives you the feeling of being inside of say a spaceship on the way to a black hole, or a variety of things. There's a Red Baron movie where you feel you're a Red Baron. So there's some things that are just plain fun, but we also always have traveling exhibits in here, and right now we have the Science of Rock and Roll. So if you're here at day camp, you're going to get to go and just have museum experience as well as some hands-on activities. And so we do those. We'll have one, say, at fall break. We'll have one at spring break. Then we have them in the summer, and then on occasional holidays like Labor Day and that sort of thing. So that's something that we do you would think it would be just for in-town people living here in Huntsville, but we actually get people who will travel, put their children in day camp, and they go do fun things for the day and come back and pick them up at the end of the day. Sometimes people like to give it as a trial run for our overnight space camp program. So they'll kind of get the children a little bit more acclimated to being here, see what their level of interest is, and then make the decision when they're old enough to go to space camp, or robotics camp, or aviation challenge, which are our 3 programs.
Well, that's something that we hear a lot today, is that, our society, or at least in the United States, we're behind other countries in science and technology and engineering and math for the STEM programs for our youth. And these are great programs that are offered here to kind of stimulate that and to foster that. And I know that a lot of one of my prior guests was Robbie Parker, the superintendent out of Madison City Schools. And they have so many now robotics programs and Lego programs that are these science programs that I'm sure you see a lot of those students that show interest in the programs that you offer out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, is that children can come here and they can be very validated in the things that they're interested in, because they're around other children who have the similar interests. And I've heard hundreds of stories of children who said, or adults who've said, it was there that I realized that I found other people who have the same passion that I had. Maybe sometimes they didn't even feel like what the children that they were in school with understood them, even, because a lot of sometimes these children are, can tell you everything there is to know about every star. They know everything about the rockets. And so when they come here, kids at school may think that's a little strange. I want to go play sports or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you get here, they find other kids who are in the same lane as them, who have the same passions, and they get validated for that. And it's and they also learn, okay, here's my passion. Where do I take that now? And so oftentimes we hear these incredible success stories of children who left space camp, and they say, okay, I know that I now need to go take this in high school. And these are the classes I'm going to need to have to prepare myself to apply for the colleges that I want to go to major in aerospace engineering or physics or whatever. And then they go on to have incredible careers in a variety of things. Our Space Camp Hall of Fame that we just inducted the 10th class of the Space Camp Hall of Fame, and this year included an astronaut who is a medical doctor. We inducted a NASA a planetary scientist, a engineer who works for Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. He's making all that he's making all that money because he really wants to build rockets, and so he's building rockets. And she is she's now a propulsion engineer there, doing really important work on reusable rockets. And not only is she a Space Camp graduate, a 2-time Space Camp graduate, but she came back here and was a counselor here, and ended up transferring to UAH from the University of Washington, and had an amazing opportunity to go out and work at Marshall Space Flight Center and co-op there, and then ended up getting her PhD at Pennsylvania State, and now is this propulsion engineer. And we also inducted a former Blue Angels pilot. So we have people who come from a variety of different areas, and not everybody who comes to space camp ends up becoming an engineer, and maybe that's not even what they want to do. But what they do learn here is a passion for space, and they also learn how to work as a member of a team and explore their own individual strengths, which is what we want them to do. We even have a payload, a public affairs officer who's part of our space camp team, because communication is a critical skill set.
Well, it's a lost skill set, and I think what point that you made there that I really took a lot in on was that finding the children that love science and technology and engineering and math and all that, and then fostering that for them, because a lot of times children have an interest, but they don't have any direction to go with it. They don't have any like-minded people to do. So fostering that foundation and then allowing them to be nurtured with people of like minds, I really think is really important. And it sounds like you guys are doing a great job of that.
We've been doing it for 35 years now, so we're pretty good at it.
Well, it's fabulous, and it's a great segue to talk a little bit about Space Camp. Can you, when we hear the word Space Camp, can you share for somebody if they have a child that's interested in space or science and technology, that if they think maybe, wow, this might be a great opportunity for my child, what is it? Can you kind of give us a one-on-one of what their child would expect to be able to do, and where do they stay and eat and all that kind of stuff?
All right here. So we start individual space camp. Now, I will say, and another thing that we see a lot of is families who say, sometimes they want to try out day camp. Sometimes they're museum members and they come all the time and enjoy our museum education managers' terrific education programs. Like we have a Saturday scientist program we do every the second Saturday of every month. And so sometimes they're just sort of enmeshed in it. But sometimes we have a lot of people who start with family camp, which you can start with children as young as 7. And a lot of times I have to tell you that sometimes our family camp participants may have a parent who always wanted to go to space camp and didn't get to, so they use their child as an excuse to come to space camp. We won't tell on them though, but they will come to space camp sometimes also just to say, let's check this out, see if this is going to be a good fit for my child, or let's check this out and make sure that I feel good about leaving my child here. And then the child comes back to us at age as young as 9, and we have ages 9 to 18, of course, and we have 3 different levels. We have Space Camp, which is 9 to 11. We have Space Academy, which is 12 to 14, and we have Advanced Space Academy, which is 15 to 18. And so for each level of those programs, they get a little bit more complex, the challenges get a little harder, because we want them to have a great time. We want them to have fun. We also want them to be challenged and have it be a very meaningful experience. So they stay here on property with us. We have what we call habitats. Everything has a space theme here. So they sleep in our habitats with their team. They're on a team of 16 students their age. If you're here in the summer during the individual season, that is children from all over the world who oftentimes you've never seen before when you arrive on Sunday, but by the time you graduate on Friday, you're best friends. And they become people, particularly today with social media and the easier ways for back in the day, they used to become pen pals, but today they, stay in touch through social media. And we have children who come year after year, who come every summer. Sometimes they start when they're 9. They come multiple times in the summer because this is a place that really becomes home, their second home to them. So they eat all their meals here in our crew galley, and all of their activities take place on this property. So they never leave this property the week that they're here.
Yeah, and essentially, as I understand it, Pat, is that they learn a lot about how space exploration works and the rockets and propulsion, what astronauts do when they're in space, and then if I understand at certain levels, they do a mission and they're part of the team and divide it up.
Right, at every level, they do teams, and of course, those missions get a little bit more complicated the older they get. So we want them to feel successful, but we also want them to have a challenge while they're figuring things out, because we want to develop critical thinking skills. We want them to problem solve. We want them to work together as a team. And sometimes we throw what we call anomalies at them, because traveling in space is not easy. So they will sometimes have a medical emergency on board the station, and they have to try to figure out what's wrong with this comatose, crewmate. And sometimes you've got an engineering challenge that's gone awry, and so they have to try to figure these things out. So that teamwork is one of the things that we really think is one of the most effective parts of our programs, because no matter what they go and do in life, that's going to be something that they take with them. So yes, they do that. They also have rocket construction, so they're learning about some of the engineering aspects of that. I had an adult woman who went on to become an extremely successful engineer with an aerospace company, and she said, when I came to space camp, I wanted to be an astronaut, and we hear that a lot. She said, but when I got there, I realized what engineers did, and she said, and I realized engineers are problem solvers, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to solve problems, and so she went on to become an incredibly successful engineer at Honeywell Aerospace Company. And so we hear a lot of those kind of stories too. It's like, oh, I figured out what I wanted to do and how I needed to do it. But we also want them to have fun, and that's one of the critical things, is have fun. We also have two other programs. We have robotics, which we have for ages 9 to 11 and 12 to 14. And then we have our Aviation Challenge program, which is kind of a military-based program that will introduces them to jet fighter training, a little taste of jet fighter training, simulators and that sort of thing.
Cool. Well, that touches in, a lot of kids now are into a lot of video games and doing, so you can kind of touch on that side of that with those kids too.
Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you, and I think I've shared this with you before the show and some correspondence, was that, my wife teaches in a local school system, and she's kind of in charge of space camp. And that was all the questions they had the other day. Really wasn't about their curriculum night. She said was mainly about space camp and getting geared up and where do they stay and, paying and doing. But you guys actually offer, for any educators that are watching, and I'm not sure how they get in touch and do that, but you actually offer discounts for schools during the year that they can prearrange and have to set it up. I'm sure all ahead. There's a lot of planning in that, but y'all do that. Y'all offer discounts for school systems to do. So here locally, I know a lot of the 6th grade schools will come out and do a week, and they stay in the habitats, the whole thing, and they get to do it with their classmates and get the same experience.
Absolutely.
But they get to do it at a discounted rate, so it's really great.
Well, yeah, I would refer to everyone to spacecamp.com, and you can find information about our group programs. And we do, from now until May, we will be seeing students who are coming as groups of school groups from around the world. I think I know in September, we've got children coming from Costa Rica and India, and we get a lot of Australians in September. So you never know who you're going to meet here, because there literally are people here from around the world.
Well, it's really cool. I know that before I want to hit on our last topic, there's a big digital billboard right out in front of the Space and Rocket Center, and then when you're driving down 565, you'll see it pop up periodically when you're driving down, welcome campers from, and I'm always entertained to see where in the world y'all have campers from that week.
Yeah, I can't keep up. I'm like, who do we have this week? But yeah, it's an amazing experience. And one of the great things to see is that children are the same no matter where they're from. And so that's, a good lesson, I think, for everybody to just see. First of all, no 12-year-old looks where he's going. I can promise you that. They are always, you can't walk through the crew galley without dodging a 12-year-old who's running, racing over to sit down and have lunch with his friends.
Well, the last thing I want to touch on, Pat, before I let you go today, is the big announcement that was yesterday. For those that may not have seen it yesterday, our governor, Kay Ivey, was here in Huntsville at the Space Center and made a big announcement where there was a $10 million grant that was given to the Space Center just to build a new building and help foster a new U.S. cyber camp. So can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yes, it was a very exciting day for the Rocket Center, kind of a monumental day, so to speak. But yes, the governor was here and announced the $10 million economic development grant, which we will put towards a project we're kind of at the very beginning stages now to being able to really look at our master plan going forward, to really analyze our needs as we look to the future, because we're growing. Our Space Camp program has experienced double-digit growth over the past 3 years. So people are very interested in what we're doing here. They know it works, and they want to send their children, and also adults and teachers and all the other people who want to take part in our programs. So we have some growth. We have some growing pains right now, because this is a giant facility, but it's not big enough. So we need to look at a way to connect our two buildings, which is going to be a very critical part of this plan going forward. And we have some very early stages of what that might be. And but this grant will enable us to move forward into doing that. But very important aspect of it is to develop a space for the U.S. Cyber Camp, which we piloted this summer with 32 children from the state of Alabama. And we will sort of see how we're going to probably start fairly small and develop this program. But the big important thing about it is that it's providing students to information about extremely important careers in cybersecurity that we will need to keep our country safe going forward. So we had a tremendous first start this summer. We had some great feedback. We're cooperating with UAH and Cyber Huntsville on that program to develop the curriculum. And it just was an amazing first year for it. And we look forward to being able, with the help of this grant, to making that something that we have here for children for a long time to come.
Well, that's really awesome, and I'm glad to see this grant come your way to facilities purposes, to allow you to expand for all the operations out there, and to allow you to build and grow from the ground up this cyber camp, which as we hear, cybersecurity is such a vital thing to our nation's security. And as we talked earlier in the program about STEM and developing that in our youth, that's something that we really need to start growing and developing too. And so I'm really excited that it's happening, even more excited that it's happening here in Huntsville. Absolutely.
It's the only place it should happen.
That's right. And so if our audience wants to find out more about, coming to see the Davidson Center and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, or they want to find more out about Space Camp, can you kind of tell us, are the two main sites really rocketcenter.com and then the Space Camp Center? I'm not sure what's the website for Space Camp.
Space Camp is spacecamp.com. So we keep it easy, rocketcenter.com and spacecamp.com. And you can cross over between the two websites are connected, but it depends on if you're just wanting the visitor experience, it's Rocket Center. If you're wanting the camp experience, Space Camp.
Well, I know I've been on the rocketcenter.com site looking through this week, and it's a very, very robust site. It has a lot of information for people if you're traveling down, coming through Alabama, or you want to make a road trip down here or if you live in the Southeast and you haven't been to the Space and Rocket Center, please check it out. I'll put that, Pat, for everybody in the comments to the show today, so everybody can find those websites and get more information. And you guys are also on social. I know you guys have been tagged and promoting a lot, especially with the eclipse and everything else. So
right, Rocket Center USA and Space Camp USA.
So follow them on Facebook and on Twitter, and to keep in touch with them. But Pat, thank you so much, and I'm really excited about all the great things that are going on out there and what's coming in the future. But thank you so much for your time.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank
Come
you.
see us.
We will. Bye-bye.